I am always surprised by how many things I post or share on social media that get responses like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that," or I can't believe you talked about like your bloody nipples while running, or your thighs chafing, or pooping your pants," like all these things. And I've realized that for whatever reason, I don't care. Yo.
I'm your host, Kat Bradley. Welcome to the BeRad Podcast, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to be here.
So good to be here. Thanks for the marg.
Oh, please. Least I could do.
So I met you at the Brooks Athlete Summit, where ironically you gave a presentation on social media. You introduced yourself as a comedian, as a runner, and as a content creator. How would you describe yourself?
I don't know. I have no clue.
That's why it's the best question.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I have so many irons in the fire, and I have such a hard time focusing on any one thing. And I think one of the things that is both a positive and a curse of Jeffrey James Binney is that I always have just so many things going on, but that's how I like it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I would describe myself. Motivational speaker, content creator, adventurer, traveler. I don't know.
Yeah.
Lots
if
of
you were
things.
describing yourself to yourself and not to someone else, then would that change?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially if I was describing it to... I often think about telling 10-year-old Jeffrey about what he's up to today because, oh my gosh, I mean, I was like a bona fide indoor kid, just this chubby little theater nerd, super out of place on a pig farm in Missouri. And if I could go back to that kid and be like, hey, here's the deal. Number one, it all works out. It's all fine. It's all good.
Yeah.
And get this, you enjoy running and have made a career out of it. That would blow the socks off of little 10-year-old Jeffrey's feet.
Yeah.
So, yes, that would change how I describe myself. I don't exactly know how I would describe myself to myself. I think I would probably just say, you finally figured it out. I think I've been trying to figure out a way to get paid to do what I want to do for a lot of years. And I seem to have hit the jackpot and have, at least for a while, an opportunity to do that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it gets much more lucky than that.
Oh, yeah. I feel that. Similar in that I was a musical theater nerd. Total musical theater. Completely. That's why
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And I also, musical theater nerd, also like complete pariah.
Really?
Which was super interesting. I realized it was just because I was extremely hyper. Mm-hmm. And when I found running brought me down to like a normal level where I could communicate at a pace that didn't want to make my peers like kill themselves. Like I was a truly intense little kid that could only be brought down with extreme exercise and musical theater.
That's really interesting. I have always struggled with attention issues, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that maybe there was a diagnosable issue that needed to be addressed. But it's I don't know. I feel like running was so profound for my attention issues, and I can't find it. I haven't looked that hard, but I would love to see if there is any research around that, because I have not only myself, I feel like I have had so many friends with similar situations who have benefited so much from running. I would love to know if there's something demonstrable, something measurable that is beneficial for people with attention issues.
Yeah, and I've noticed that trend too. And if it's not attention issues, it's like some other learning difference that's like related to that, whether it be dyslexia or ADHD or dysgraphia. My brother has dysgraphia, which is essentially another attention deficit disorder, you know, and it's just, I was heavily medicated at starting 10 years old,
really?
Which really like kind of shaped how I viewed my own learning, and I just really resented school because of it. Dropped out of college, like all blah blah blah, even though I got recruited to run at a D1 school. And And it's totally true. I think just in the last like 5 years or so, it's talked about more. Like I've seen all types of things about, ADHD education, which has been like, oh shit, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy for forgetting my keys.
Do you come from an education background, or you use the phrase learning difference, which is, so I come from a nannying, worked in preschools for a while. That's a very inclusive way for you to describe.
Well, I eventually did finish my degree, was in a kindergarten teacher, and then was working to get my special ed before I went pro.
Awesome.
So did not finish that cert, but also like true heroes. I would not have lasted.
I was a para in a special education preschool. It was a subsidized, government-funded preschool. So, the worst. Not all of them, but some kids who really had gotten the short end of the stick in life. It was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so inspiring. These kids were incredible. But I think I cried at least once every day.
Oh my gosh.
It was brutal.
For sure cried once a day.
Yeah.
And I was teaching too. I was doing this, I was doing practicum hours in high risk and high needs areas, specifically in Aurora, Colorado. And I am impressed that you use the word inspired, because I was extremely disheartened by the education system.
Well, I have an uncanny knack for putting a positive spin on really tragic circumstances.
Yeah, that's good for you. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, it was hard. It was gut wrenching every day.
Yeah.
I felt like my heart at least once was ripped out of my chest. And it was so hard to not adopt all of them. A lot of them were in the system and were available, and it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah. And that's also, just shows what kind of person you are. Because it's, they're with kids with differences or disabilities, it's, sometimes outbursts are violent and, targeted at you, even if that's not what they mean, and so I would never was like, I want to take one of these kids home, and even though I felt so deeply for them and I cared for them, I like really truly loved my students, but I was always like, I need to be a hermit.
Yeah, it's hard I can only imagine that nurses and other professions deal with the same thing, but it's so hard to remove yourself emotionally from it. It's hard to detach, and it's hard.
Yeah. So speaking of hard things and possible coping mechanisms.
I know where this is going.
Do you?
Yeah, I think so.
My love for musical theater also led me to comedy.
Oh.
And I've dabbled at open mics, but more so, and I've always hoped to do more, but the time fills. But I'm just like a nerd. I don't read anything about running, even though that's my whole career. Everything I read is comedy. How does that fit in your life between, nanny, working with special ed kids? Why did you lean towards comedy? And, I'll dive right into it. Was it because it was a coping mechanism? It sure as shit was for me. Like my family has to be like, stop fucking joking so much.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think it almost always is, isn't it? It's, people discover me on social media right now, and they are like, oh, where did he come from? This is so wild that this husky ginger dude like dances kind of okay in the woods. Like, this is wild. And if you know my history, it actually makes a ton of sense. My mom put me in dance classes when I was 4 years old. I loved it, but hated it because there was only one other boy and he quit and I was getting made fun of. So I demanded to quit, and that only lasted until high school. And in the meantime, I had been playing the piano since I was 5. I was getting super into music, into band and marching band and everything. And I discovered dance again. I became a pretty decent little tap dancer, and then decided to go to college for musical theater. I lived in New York and pursued musical theater for 7 or 8 years, and I was so lucky. I had a great run of it, but it's a hard lifestyle. It's hard. You're constantly looking for work. You're so excited to get a contract for 3 months, and then you're back in New York serving tables, auditioning, trying to find the next job, and you book it and you go do it, and then you come back in this endless cycle that was so fun in my 20s, but I hit 30 and I was just kind of struggling to, I don't know. I just realized I'm never going to have a yard in New York. I'm never probably going to own a home. All these things that you start to think about when you hit 30. And I don't know why I was gravitating towards comedy, but I had started taking improv classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York. And I was an okay improviser, but I wasn't great. But that led me to stand-up. And I was terrified of stand-up. I don't know if I've ever been scared of anything more. But I made myself, get up on stage and tell jokes, and it was excruciating. It's New York. I'm in a lot of open mics. Nobody shows up except for comics.
I did my first open mic at Dangerfield.
Wow, that is such bravery.
I didn't know.
It's like laughably brutal. I mean, we're talking like literally fellow comics booing each other in a completely empty comedy club at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's just the most surreal, heart destroying experience. But I started to have a couple good sets, and when it goes good, it feels so good. Unlike theater where you're in charge of your performance, but somebody else designed the costume, somebody else wrote the script, someone else wrote the score, someone else did this, someone else did that. With stand-up, it's all you. You were in control of literally everything except for the stage and the lights. And so when you fail, it's all your fault. But when you succeed, it's all your fault. Mm-hmm. And I became addicted to that. I was like, oh my gosh, when this is good, it's so good, and it's all me. So it's there was a sense of pride that I really hadn't felt, I think, in other performing arenas. But then I was really quickly confronted with the realities of the stand-up world. It's the Wild West of the entertainment industry. I was coming from the theater world where I was in the union and everything is controlled and there are rules and you have this many lights around your dressing room, station, and everything is just so controlled, to the stand-up world where, again, literally the Wild West of the entertainment industry. There are no rules. You might get paid. Who knows when? And I'm not a night owl. And, I was just desperate to go on stage at 1 a.m. to tell, mediocre poop jokes to a bunch of drunk strangers. And that's kind of when the idea for my film was born. I was just so over trying to be a part of somebody else's project, and I was also grieving the loss of my mom and was not in a good place emotionally, and I really just needed a project. And that's where the idea came from. Yeah,
so your film, Once Is Enough, came from a lack of fulfillment in comedy and a lack of stability and wanting to do something else creative.
Yeah, because I shouldn't speak for everyone. Most comedians' dream is to do their first special, whether it used to be HBO, now it's Netflix, to write your first hour of content that somebody wants to produce and get out there. And I just realized that was years off at best. If ever, I was years away from that. And I don't know that I would say my film is on par with a Netflix comedy special, but I just had a sense of why wait? Why wait for somebody else's opportunity? Let's do this. I think I have an interesting story here. I think I'm doing this crazy thing that I want to do, running a 100-mile ultra marathon for interesting reasons, and I think there's a story here. I think there's a story that's worth telling. Yeah. I guess what? I think, if anything, I would describe myself as a storyteller. It took us, 35 minutes to get to answer the first question. But if I were to describe myself, I think I would describe myself as a storyteller.
Yeah. Your stories or just stories?
I think most of them are mine. I think I love telling other interesting stories too. But I am always surprised by how many things I post or share on social media that get responses like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that," or I can't believe you talked about like your bloody nipples while running, or your thighs chafing, or pooping your pants, like all these things. And I've realized that for whatever reason, I don't care about those things. And so, I think a lot of the stories I tell are self-deprecating stories or embarrassing stories, because I really feel like I am on a side mission to just make everyone stop giving a shit so much about stuff like that. Everybody poops. Yeah. Like we all poop. We all are nervous about the same things. We're all self-conscious about the same things. I, especially on social media, wish we could all just stop pretending like everything's perfect and talk about the realities of life. Sometimes we poop our pants on long runs. And that's okay. Yeah. That's okay, Kat.
Oh my gosh. I have done it and I have talked about it on social media.
And I think people are drawn to that. I think people, when I was first getting into running, I consumed every single film, every podcast, every book, every movie, everything that existed about ultramarathons. I consumed it. And it was so inspiring to see all these people like Scott Jurek and all these other people just like destroying records and running these races at ridiculously high speeds. But there were no like husky, middle-aged ginger lumberjacks doing these things. Like I couldn't find myself anywhere. Like I couldn't find anyone doing these things. And I knew that they were doing them. I just couldn't find anyone else. And so, again, part of why the film was born, because I was like, you know what? I'm a normal, very average, very unathletic dude. Even if I'm not successful, I think there's value in other people, like, watching me try this. Like, I might not be successful. They might not be successful, but that doesn't matter. There's a lot of value in just, like, starting the journey. You know?
Totally. I actually just like a few hours ago read this thing. I am dealing with this whole slew of injuries dating back to 2015. And so I started working with a sports psychologist, and he just emailed me something that just said, "Let go of perfectionism." And that was literally all he said. And it just right before you walked in the door. And I think that's what you are showing to people who are pursuing getting out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, we come from such polar opposite running worlds. A friend of mine who's a collegiate runner, he texted me a few days ago and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I just ran a so-and-so minute on my 800 meter. And I thought about Googling what an 800 meter was. And I just replied and I said, "I am so excited for you. I don't know what kind of fast runner bullshit you're talking about, but it sounds very exciting. Congratulations." But it's those moments where I realize that like there's just such a different like running experience between like people who are winning races and people who are just there for the fireball shots and to finish, to survive,
I have been DFL twice also, so.
Okay, good.
Dead fucking last for those of you who don't know.
Sometimes called last ass. Yeah. There's lots of versions.
So I've been on both ends, taking the ball shots at mile 95, and also pursuing goals. But those are, I will say that the people that I will talk to my running goals about are the people who don't know anything about running, because I get the best responses. Yeah, they're just like, "I love you." And I'm like, "That's all I really needed. Thanks."
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting, like coming to running from being someone who grew up just so unathletic, because I think at the core, I think we're probably all running for the same reasons. But it's, I don't know, I just think it's interesting, those of us who find it later in life. I constantly say I think it was hands down the best therapy that I could have found after losing my mom.
Yeah.
I'm sure real therapy would have been better, but it was a close consolation. I think, I don't know.
And cheaper.
It definitely cheaper. Marginally, but definitely cheaper.
But now you're getting paid to do it. So.
Right. So it works out.
Yeah.
Eventually.
You've said you're unathletic like 3 to 5 times since we've talked. And I just want to you said something really impactful at the Brooks Summit. And I had a similar experience when I was in high school maybe I was a freshman in high school. And you talked about the doctor listening to your heart. Can you tell that story really quick?
Yeah, I had been training for, I guess, a year and a half, getting ready for the Leadville 100. That's the race that I thought was the right choice for my first 100-mile ultramarathon. And, the whole thing that inspired me to do this was losing my mom to obesity-caused heart disease. I was 350 pounds, and I was, on the same railroad tracks right behind her. And so I was trying to do things right. And a few weeks before the Rocky Raccoon 100, which was the 100-miler, oh, no, it was Leadville, a few weeks before Leadville, I went to the doctor. I just scheduled a checkup just to make sure that everything looked good and was in order and that I still had a doctor's blessing to go do this crazy thing. And, obviously always on edge at the doctor because of my mom's history. So the doctor was doing all his normal checks and everything, and then he listened to my heart, and he kind of did a confused dog head tilt and moved the stethoscope and looked weird again and moved it again and listened again and said, hey, if you'll excuse me for a moment, I'll be right back. And my mind went south so fast, just started spiraling into, obviously, you knew this was coming, this runs in the family, you've been a fat ass your whole life, you've never, you've all these things. I mean, he was gone probably 45 seconds, but I really went on a journey in those 45 seconds. And then he reemerged with a much younger dude, and he said to me, hey, this one is so-and-so. He's a resident. Do you mind if I have him listen to your heart? It's not very often that we get to hear the heart rate of an ultra athlete.
Boom.
What did you call me, sir? My heart dropped. That was the first time that anyone, anywhere, had referred to me as an athlete. And I will never forget it. It was very impactful.
Yeah. Athlete.
You're right.
I don't want any of that non-athletic bullshit.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? I mean, I finally got rid of it, but I used to, I think I had athlete in quotes in my Instagram bio for a while.
You still do on your website.
Oh, do I? Because she knows.
I know.
And I finally got rid of it out of my IG profile because I don't call myself an athlete for entertainment purposes. I mean, I think an athlete or a runner is anyone who's been on a run. Mm-hmm. Anyone who enjoys running, who's been on a run relatively-ish recently, you're a runner. I don't feel like there's any gates that keep anyone from calling themselves a runner. Same for athletes, but for people who grew up having a label of super not athlete, yeah. It's just, even still, I am an athlete, of course I'm an athlete, but it's just, I don't know, there's something in me that's so hilariously preposterous to seriously. I mean, I'm an athlete. I am an athlete. Mm-hmm. But in the typical sense of the word athlete, it just I'm laughing now thinking about calling myself an athlete because what I'm doing out there, I don't know that it's athleting, I mean, I'm just having a good time going for a run. Sometimes I take dance breaks. Sometimes I stop and sing to the animals. And so it is. I realize it's athletic. It is athleticism. But it's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to take myself seriously.
Wouldn't it be so much better if that's how we thought of athleticism, though?
Absolutely.
I come from a family of extreme athletes. Uh-huh. My mom was a professional athlete. My brother is 6'7". My sister was a freak tennis player.
Was the pressure off the chain?
Oh, off the chain. Which made me totally hate sports.
Of course.
I actually got into running because I was getting in trouble for being a truant, skipping school, and also
a truant. It's such a dramatic word for a kid who is not in the mood to go to school.
Smoking too much weed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, "You're skipping too much school. Join a sport or get kicked out." And I was like, volleyball. Got kicked off the volleyball team. And then joined cross country, which is a different story, but so much pressure in my family to be a good athlete. And my sister, who was kind of the star athlete of the family, was getting free tennis gear at like age 10. Was people talked about her when she her name was on the start list. I don't know the tennis details, but she does not like sports anymore.
I'm so sorry, but I need to. No. I think the battery ran out.
Well, good thing we have 2 other cameras.
Oh, we're good for 12 minutes.
Oh, cool.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, you were talking about your sister. And
the only way I got her, she swore off sports for 10 years almost. And now she's slowly starting to get into running, and I'm coaching her, and I told her, I'm like, don't do anything that doesn't feel good. If that's walking, then walk. Mm-hmm. And literally, if that's dancing, then dance. And she's like a great dancer too. And I'm just like, then do that. It doesn't have to be performance based, and it's the only way that she's found to enjoy running ever. And that is so cool, because that's exactly what you're doing.
Well, and I feel such a need when I'm out, quote unquote, running to not run, because I can't tell you how many people I talk to who are like, oh, I'd love to try an ultramarathon, but I would have to walk a little bit. What? I know. The people who are winning ultramarathons are walking a little bit. Do not let that keep you from it. And even if you're not going to run 100 milers, it doesn't matter. Go walk a mile. It doesn't matter. Go do it and have fun for reasons other than being fast or impressing people with your athletic prowess. There are so many, in my opinion, more important reasons to do it than that. Go have fun.
Yeah,
go play outside
because it feels good.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. And that me understanding that in my adult life, because I was a conditioned collegiate athlete who just hated her life. And since understanding how much I actually do just like to go out, whatever that means, it's changed me, and it's been helped me talk to my sister about it, and to hopefully my brother, who's another intense athlete.
Well, and I think that's the cool thing about the running community, is that there is a place for literally everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of type A, down to the millisecond runner you are, or if you are a DGAF runner who's going to have fun and take fireball shots and dance at aid stations. There's a place in the running community for you, and I think that's so freaking cool.
Yeah, it's so freaking cool. It's especially the trail running community, which is why I landed here as a trail runner. As someone who just was a little weird for the track world. Mm-hmm. I just wanted something that could mold to my weird too.
I think you found it.
Yeah, totally. Right back at you. So I'm just, as someone who's just a fan of comedy and the lifestyle, and also an ultra runner, I see similarities in the types of people who run ultras and the comedians that I know. What similarities do you see? And I'm even curious about lifestyle, on paper, completely different lifestyles. One, you got to be a night owl, the other favors morning, early morning people. But, I feel it's more complicated than that. What would you draw from both of those, and what skills have you brought to the table from both running and comedy?
Well, I think, in both, especially ultra running and comedy, they share a sense of longevity, in that the only way to be successful is to, in the typical hard moments that are inevitable, just saying, hey, I'm going to abandon every reasonable human instinct and I'm going to keep running. Or despite those 7 shows I did where I completely bombed, literally got booed, and there's no legitimate reason why I should even think about continuing with comedy, making the choice to like keep soldiering forward, that's when like the really magical stuff happens. So, you know, I think that's the biggest similarity between the two. And I think nothing has taught me that more than ultra running. But also, you know, like how varied they are. I mean, everyone thinks of comedy as stand-up comedy and specials and going to comedy clubs. But there's so many other forms of comedy. I mean, you know, David Sedaris, I mean, gosh, his books are just hilarious. You know, I mean, it's hard to find like funnier written word. Same with comedic actors, or now social media has created all of these outlets for comedic content creators. And so I think I also love that both worlds are so diverse. Like there's, like we just said, there's so many different types of runners. There's so many different runner paths that one can go on. But same with comedy. I mean, I just feel infinitely lucky that I'm in a position where I can produce my own comedic content on social media. And I don't have to rely on somebody else giving me a job, me auditioning for somebody else's project. It is maybe the greatest luxury as a creative is being in charge of your own work. That's really lovely.
Yeah, lovely. I also find I sometimes crave the normalcy of a regular job. Do you ever find yourself struggling with that?
Yeah, I can't give up my day job. I still have it.
Oh, really? What is your day job?
I do operations for a tech adjacent company, a small company, and it itches this. While I am really creative and I am like that guy, I also, until 8th grade, was bound and determined to be an astronaut. I was obsessed with science, especially astronomy. I wrote letters to astronauts. They responded. I have signed mission photos on my bedroom, my childhood bedroom, that are still hanging. I mean, I was so obsessed until I took an artistic detour. But the operations role like totally itches that analytical data side of my brain.
Yeah. What part of you wanting to be an astronaut was adventure versus that, you know, analytical, organized part of you?
100% adventure.
Yeah.
It's so stupid that it took me until 40 years of age to realize this, but I've realized that, like, since I was a little kid, I was obsessed with adventure. I was obsessed with the Titanic. I was obsessed with Lewis and Clark. Do you have any Lewis and Clark questions? I am a self-proclaimed armchair Lewis and Clark expert, so if you have any burning questions, I probably have the answer. Shackleton, you know, the expedition to Antarctica, it took me until I was an adult to realize that, like, I was obsessed with all of these adventure stories when I was a little kid. I've been obsessed with air travel since I was a little kid, which I think was a huge part of wanting to be an astronaut. I really wanted to be a pilot. And I think it's just like, you know, that's the last frontier, you know, if you were born in 1982. And so I think everything is informed by me being obsessed with adventure.
Yeah.
I think that was a very smart question.
Yeah.
I wish you would have asked me 10 years ago before I realized that on my own.
I asked because I really wanted to be an astronaut too. And
really? We are the same person. Little musical theater nerd, little astronaut.
And I said that and I lit up because I almost laughed. I was like dedicated to this project where I was, I had this connection with this guy in Hawaii who worked with NASA. And so I got an internship with him in high school because I wanted to be an astronaut. And I was, it was a Mars simulation on Mauna Loa. And I was their contact person. So I was like,
How old were you?
I was like 17, 18. And I was like in charge of, you know, things like if they ran out of toilet paper, I would report it and log it. But what I realized about myself in this is I am incredibly disorganized. And I got fired. I literally literally was losing like the people who are astronauts are relying on me, and I like am great at talking the talk, sometimes not walking the walk, you know, and you know, these people in this Mars simulation where they can't leave for 6 months were relying on me for things like toilet paper, and I forgot. So
that is the most Jeffrey thing I've ever heard.
Oh my God. And it was like just me at first being like, I am a failure. And then after I was like, like maybe I don't want to be on a computer at all, and I need to do something else. And that was my first realization that I was like, it's not necessarily like being an astronaut. In fact, like I really like Earth. I think I can't work in the confines of what is a 9-to-5 right now.
Well, and I don't know what your parents did, but I grew up on a farm. My mom worked for my dad. They worked so hard, but it was super seasonal. So, you know, spring and fall were wild, like absolute craziness. I mean, my dad would be working 16 hours a day. But then winter was really chill. Like our family kind of hibernated. Like we went to school, but like he would go out and fix the machinery and feed the pigs and tootle around. But our lives were so seasonal and within our own control. And my sister and I both, as adults, have realized that we're fine. Like we respect authority. We can work for other people. We can show up to work on time, but neither of us thrive in that environment. We both are much more successful and happy if we have like that same autonomy and like seasonality. Like we really, even my husband now, he gets so annoyed in the winter. I hunker down. I hibernate. Like, I mean, we live in Los Angeles. There's no reason to stay inside, but there's just something about winter that like, I'm going to binge some TV shows. Like that's what I'm ready for. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. Those things that we don't think about growing up. I have found a lot of them to be like interesting as adults. I think they linger.
Yeah, totally. My mom was a model.
Oh, okay. So not a typical mom story.
Definitely.
And your dad, what did he do?
He was in real estate. So both lots of ups and downs. My parents were split though. And you know, so definitely like an unpredictable like
but
ups and
also
downs.
Very not 9-to-5 jobs.
No, exactly. Neither of them 9-to-5 jobs. Especially my mom, like work like, oh, I got a job right now.
What type of modeling did she do? Like what?
All kinds. So in the 80s, she was one of the, the fitness videos where they're like, I'm doing workouts. She was like the star of those. And then, but also my aunt who lives in France now, my mom's sister, has this story about a Tiffany's ad in France, like a giant Tiffany's ad at a billboard in the middle of Paris. And my mom is in, and like no one, my mom doesn't even know that's where she's landed.
Cool.
So, yeah, so like really crazy, which is like I have the similar stories of being in dance when I was 4 and me being like, no.
That's amazing. Where did you grow up?
Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an interesting childhood.
Oh, yeah. You don't know the half of it yet.
I can only imagine. Well, we've got dinner yet.
Yeah. Another margarita and some dinner.
Exactly.
So you started running because I remember you saying that when your mom was in the hospital, you started running.
Yeah.
Did you just like walk out of the hospital and go for a run?
Pretty much. I had been living in Brooklyn and I had gotten uncomfortable in New York and I couldn't totally figure it out. I couldn't figure out why. I had been there at that point for I guess like 6, almost 7 years, and I didn't have a car. And I discovered cycling, which I know is not a novel thought, but some friends like bought bikes and I was like, oh sure, I'll get a bike. And I suddenly became obsessed with riding my bike around New York City. It is a shockingly efficient way to get around New York City. Mm-hmm. I could get most places faster on my bike than I could get on the subway. I got a little bit of exercise. And at this point, my mom was like declining. So it was, I guess, in the back of my mind, but it wasn't the reason that I started cycling. But about a year after I discovered cycling was when her final decline started, and I went back to Missouri, and she was at the end in the ICU for almost 4 months at the end, which meant I was living in the ICU waiting room. We had a hotel like next to the hospital, but I don't know. I just couldn't I couldn't leave her there. Yeah. So lots of time in the waiting room. And there was a trail running magazine. Every month a new version of Trail Running Magazine would show up, and I just kept picking it up. And at first I remember literally making a joke and be like, oh my God, there's a magazine about how specific is this? People pay for this. This is hilarious. And I just kept reading it, and I kept reading about ultra marathons. I was like, man, that sounds crazy. Like, how cool. And then we had a particularly bad hospital day. Well, the worst of days. We were given some pretty final news. And I just went to a running store, bought a pair of shoes, and went and found a trail. They were like Vibram neoprene 5-finger shoes on a rainy February day in Missouri. They could not possibly have been a worse shoe choice. A guy literally made fun of me on the trail, which I didn't realize at the time. I thought he was complimenting my shoes, but now, looking back, I realized he was calling out how ridiculous it was that I chose those shoes on a muddy winter trail in Missouri. But anyway, I went to this trail, and within minutes was hooked. First I felt like a little kid. I felt like I was playing. I was literally jumping over logs. I was dirty, and I was like, wait, what is this? This is silly. This is fun. And another huge thing was that nobody was timing me. Nobody was watching my fat jiggle. Nobody was timing me. No one gave a crap. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. And then, first and foremost, for that brief period of time, I didn't think about my mom and my problems and all that stuff. And I remember that run so well. And I've been hooked since. It was really memorable. And it was everything that running wasn't, or I thought, or so I thought, So I thought. To me, running was, that time of year, every year when you have to do the Presidential Physical Fitness Award things, and you have to run a mile, and I would get in trouble because I would have a bad attitude and I would refuse to run the whole thing, and then I'd laugh about how slow my time was. So it was just such I don't know. It was really shocking to me to go for a run and enjoy it. It was a very un-Jeffrey thing of me to do. Yeah.
But now a very Jeffrey thing.
Now it is the most of Jeffrey things to do.
What advice would you give to you pre-running, or to another person who's, running curious?
Chill out.
Preach it.
Chill the frick out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It may be, I don't know what it is that you're worried about. It might matter a little bit. I certainly don't want to say it's insignificant, but just go for a run. Go do the thing. Go do the race. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you get pulled. It doesn't matter if you DNF. It doesn't matter if you fall and break a bone. It doesn't it doesn't matter. Just go just go. Just do it and have the experience. And if there's anything stupid keeping you from it, and I use the word stupid lightly because it's, I don't want to make light of it, but if you're self-conscious about something, if you're worried you're not going to be fast enough, if you're worried, just go do it. Just get outside and have fun.
Yeah.
Just focus on what I think really matters, which is just getting out there and doing the thing.
Yeah. Hell yeah. What is, I just feel like you have a lot of wisdom. I feel like you've lived a ton of lives. Farmer, comedian, nanny, working with high needs kids. Wealth of knowledge. What is just a general piece of life advice that you would give? I think there are two. The first thing is
This is something that happens often in general with people who call themselves comedians, but people are often surprised to find out that I'm actually a lot more introverted and quiet than people would think. And if you put me in a crowd of people, if I need to perform, if I need to be the center of attention, I got it. Cool, I'll do it. But that's not my default. By default, in a room of strangers, I chill in the corner. I am affable and chatty, but I'm an observer. Until I've got the lay of the land, I tend to be pretty reserved. And there's a quote by Abraham Lincoln that I'm going to totally butcher. But anytime somebody points that out or asks me why that is, I always share this quote. Abraham Lincoln said, "It's better to keep your mouth shut and have people think you're an idiot than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." So I like to err on the side of less words more than more words, which is going to be hilarious for any of my friends or people that I work with, because I tend to be long-winded. But that's one. The other one, I think the more global life advice, it's where the title for my film, Once Is Enough, came from. It's a quote by Mae West. And she said, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough." So that's how we settled on the title for the film, because I loved that I knew people would hear, "Oh, it's a film about this guy who runs a 100-mile ultramarathon. It's called Once Is Enough." Oh, okay, well, running it once was enough. No, that's not where the title came from.
Wow. That's what I thought.
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, that was the goal. That was the goal.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm like just so curious about what's next for you.
I don't know. My life has been turned upside down the last year and a half. So many bonkers opportunities have presented themselves.
Like?
Well, number one, I am getting to travel a ton. I decided to try to host some trips and see if any of my followers wanted to travel with me. And it turned out they were super into it. And it's so much fun. And I think most of all, I just am so filled with a sense of pride when I go on these trips, because every time, everyone on the trips they're all awesome. Like, I'm so worried every time. I'm like, oh, what is it going to be like? All these random strangers coming together. Everyone is consistently awesome. And I mean, it's not my doing, but I am so proud of the fact that, like, if you pluck random people out of my follower base and put them together, like, they're gonna have a blast and they're gonna be awesome. Mm-hmm. They all have a sense of adventure. Like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. I'm absolutely obsessed with traveling with my followers right now. So that's one thing that's been awesome. I mean, working with Brooks has been bonkers. I mean, like, literally, that's one thing above all others that I would love to tell 10-year-old Jeffrey is like, hey, listen to this. One of the biggest running brands in the world is going to pay you to write stupid dance TikToks about running. What?
You're going to be like, what's TikTok? I quit dance.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's absolutely bonkers. Some TV opportunities are presenting themselves. Just all kinds of, just like really, really exciting things. And I couldn't possibly be more grateful. I've not always been this lucky. I think it's really frustrating for most, especially actors, musicians, singers. It's really frustrating to see people who have found like a really bonkers amount of success talk about like, oh, like how did that happen? And them say, well, I worked really hard and then I finally got what I deserved. And that's, I have a guttural recoil reaction to that, because I don't know, maybe it's just because I like had to struggle a little longer, but I don't know. There's so many.
Then what's your answer? Like, if it's not that, because I feel similar, and I feel in a similar way, because I feel constantly like just falling a little short, and I work hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've worked really freaking hard. I've worked my little cojones off, and I'm also decently talented. That being said, I could give you a list of at least 100 friends who have worked harder than me, who are more talented than me, who deserve anything that I've got more than I deserve. So it's not that I don't deserve it. It's just that I acknowledge that there are other people who probably deserve it more if the universe were a truly fair place. So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. That's
Totally.
kind of my feeling.
Yeah, I have always defaulted to luck and then gratitude when people have asked that question, because generally, you know, I feel like I'm falling short all the time, but, you know, a lot of people would pay to be in my shoes. And I feel that way, that it is in huge part due to luck.
I think it might have been Liza Minnelli, but somebody at some point said, success is when luck and preparedness meet. And I think that's correct. Or at least that's it for me. It's not that I'm the best person suited to be what I'm doing right now. It's that I got lucky. And when I got lucky, I luckily was in a place to seize the moment and capitalize on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that quote too. That's, I think, something that I strive to be is prepared, because
Yes.
I'm just looking for luck.
Yeah, well, you know, nobody knows it better than actors, comedians. I mean, it's a brutal industry. It's a constant, like, the one thing for sure is that you will constantly be
rejected.
Yep, without question.
So I think, you know, with all people who found kind of a niche for themselves and are successful in their craft operate just like on a different frequency and are just maybe a little bit different. And I found that in myself. And at first it was something that I didn't like about myself. At first I was like, why can't I talk to my peers, you know? And, and now I realize, and I'm grateful for that, because, the differences in my personality and kind of that frequency that I'm on, have been what has led to my successes. What are those traits in you that you see in yourself?
Well, this is something I talk with my therapist about a lot. I'm borderline obsessed with self-awareness. I have been since I was a little kid, I now realize. And even, you know, in middle school, I look back to complicated social situations where maybe I was being bullied or something else was happening. And I've realized that, like, I have always really wanted / needed to know what everyone thought. Not only about a situation, but especially about me. And that in turn has given me, I think, a lot of empathy, because my first reaction in like a difficult situation is to be like, okay, like, why are they, here's where they're coming from. Is that why are they doing this? Like, okay, they're doing this because they're feeling, you know, that I think has been really, really valuable as an adult. To like be kind of, and as a performer, you know, I think it's so fascinating when performers take the stance of like, oh, well, I don't read reviews, I don't like any of that. I understand, I get that. I get that. But for me, I mean, the job of an actor, the sole job of an actor, is to hoodwink the audience into believing that you are whatever you're trying to be. And I can't think of anything that's more important in that role than what the people in the audience thought of you. And if you are secure and confident enough, you can hear that feedback and you can say, oh, no, that's bullshit. Like, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense, or they're ill-informed or whatever. And at the same time, you can hear a different comment and say, oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I could see why they saw that. I could see why they thought that. I am just like obsessed with getting feedback, getting really honest feedback. Again, because of that like self-awareness there's nothing more terrifying to me than having no clue what somebody thinks of me. And I don't even care if you hate me. If you hate me, that's fine. There are, not a lot, but there are a few reasons that if you want to diametrically hate me, like, I get it. And I'm okay with that as long as I understand that's your stance. But the not knowing drives me crazy.
Carson's going to edit this and laugh and be like, Jesus, they're the same.
Oh God, were you going to say the same?
No, well, I call it being in limbo with someone if I don't know how they feel about me, and it tortures me.
Well, and it's, in the workplace, it's given me this hilarious reputation because at any time there's any conflict whatsoever, people are hesitant in the company. I oversee quite a few different people, and there's a hesitancy to bring me into it because they know that if they tell me about it, then I'm going to pull everyone into a meeting. I'm going to make us all talk about our feelings. Like, they know that I'm immediately going to tackle it because I feel like communication issues are almost always at the root of that BS.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so important for everyone to just know how everyone's feeling. Like, it doesn't, like, the way you're feeling is probably valid. Maybe you're reacting to it in not a constructive way, but everyone's feelings are valid, so let's talk about them, explain what you're feeling, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It
would, things would be so much more efficient.
I think like so. If they just put us in charge.
Yeah, my family calls it confrontational. But
I know. Well, in the Midwest, I was so avoidant of confrontation. I would get I would have like a visceral physical reaction to confrontation, more so like leading up to it than in the actual moment. But if it did catch me by surprise, I would shut down. Mm-hmm. Like if it was unexpected, I couldn't all I could do was like, yeah, okay, yes, of course, and leave. I couldn't have a conversation. And bartending and nannying, but especially bartending, knocked it right out of me. You don't have that luxury as a bartender. Sometimes people are belligerently drunk and you just have to throw them out of the bar. And it sounds so silly, but that's what got rid of my Midwestern confrontation avoidance was bartending. I finally learned a lesson.
Yeah. And do you think with that you were self-aware before, but you kind of use being self-aware and secure in yourself together as if there were parallels? Do you feel like that kind of merged them, where you became more secure in yourself when you're able to deal with that confrontation?
Well, I think I think one goes before the other. I think you have to be a certain amount of secure in yourself before you can hear that negative feedback and accurately gauge what's what. Yeah. If you're in an unhealthy self-conscious space, there's no feedback that's well, I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but feedback is much harder to see as positive when you're in that space. Yep. Whereas if you are in a more confident space, you can hear feedback and say, again, no, that's bullshit. Like, I know that's not true. They don't know there's something that they don't know, and like they're wrong. So I'll dismiss that, and I'm not going to obsess over it. And then there might be another comment where, if you can't look at a lot of feedback or criticism of your work and find at least 10% of it that's like, oh yeah, like they have a point, like that's a little bit true, like then I think that's probably a more negative reflection on you than the criticism. Yeah. Because none of us are perfect. So if you can't hear any negative criticism and say, oh, maybe there's a shred of truth to this, then I understand why you don't want to hear criticism.
Oh, totally.
Because that's a really hard place to be in if you're not. And what a luxury to be that confident,
What a luxury, but also what a burden to always I know I struggled with that in the past, just coming from a family of perfectionists, and then also having people in my life that have worked through that, like never,
for sure,
taking feedback of any kind. It's like also like that sucks for you, because you're just gonna live in like your pain,
Yeah, 100%.
But and I have 2 more questions, I swear.
Well, let's hear
I'm just so curious about you. I closed my book because I'm just riffing now. But I want to know what you're working on right now in yourself. Whatever you're willing to share. I know it's a personal question.
Well, side note, we can't include this. Like, I super can't talk about this.
Okay.
I just finished final casting for Naked and Afraid.
Oh my God. Okay, we have lots to talk about.
So this, like, I can't talk about it, but, like, I'm trying to make that decision. And it's like, I can't talk about it. Yeah, I so want to. It's like, but anyway, so that's the answer that I would give.
Starting here.
Yeah. I think my current mission is to help more people do the crazy things that I've been doing the past few years. I started hosting these trips from a pretty selfish standpoint, to be honest. I was like, oh, well, I can travel, and like some people are going to come with me, and like, won't that be fun for me? And then it just took, well, the first trip I noticed it, and then the second trip solidified it. But I realized that there are so many people out there who don't enjoy the luxury of the same blind confidence that I have. I would never think twice about going on a trip to Patagonia with a bunch of strangers because I saw some dude that I like on Instagram talk about it. And I've realized that, like, that's really brave for a lot of people. That's a really huge step for a lot of people. In Patagonia, we had a 72-year-old guy who was with us, and he was so worried about the trip being a bunch of 23-year-olds who were just like blowing past him. He had the most amazing time. And so I think, not that I'm giving them these opportunities, but being a conduit that's encouraging people to take these risks and see the world. I can't think of very many things more valuable than travel. So to be facilitating that is pretty bonkers. I'm pretty stoked about it. I'm launching a YouTube channel. A lot of the content is from these trips, but my other, backpacking trips and general outdoor tomfoolery. But I'm just so excited to launch the YouTube channel because even just from the first couple trips, there's just so many interesting stories of really cool people who follow me who decided to really go out on a limb and go on one of these trips. And I don't know, I'm really enjoying that.
That's so cool. Carson and I's dream is to host trips like that. So,
Do it.
Yeah, we're started. We just did one partnered with the coaching company I work with in Arizona, which was a huge success. And then we're hoping to do one in on the North Shore of Hawaii. That's a trail running blend, but also he's Hawaiian, has a deep history in Hawaii. And
do it. The travelers are going to have such a bonkers experience, but you are too. It's going to be so rewarding.
Yeah. So last question, and probably my favorite question, and I ask this of all my guests. What is something that you are proud of that no one would know, your husband can know? That's about it. Besides Lewis and Clark.
Oh, that was about to be my answer. Yeah. I know a lot about Lewis and Clark.
Still won't count.
No, but it's a lot. I know a lot.
You need to choose an entirely different avenue.
Gosh, that's a hard one. Do you ask everybody that question?
Mm-hmm. You should have studied.
I should have. Ask it again.
What is something that you are proud of that none of your followers would know? And your husband can know, your family can know, but, your average Joe, from me and my Google search prior to this podcast, I would have no clue.
Well, it's not something that you wouldn't have any clue about, but everyone wants to talk about me running a 100-mile ultra marathon, which I understand why they want to talk about that. But arguably, the harder part of that whole process was the filmmaking process. The filmmaking journey, I think, is kind of the silent, untold story of my last 5 years. And I am, I came from the theater world, not the film and television world, but they're adjacent. And before I set out to make my film, I asked all my friends, I was like, hey, I have this idea. Like, I don't know, like, do you have any advice? What does it entail? Like, am I getting myself in over my head? All these questions. And nobody was unsupportive, but everyone was super cautious. Everyone was like, it's a fun idea. Like, go for it if you want to. And we had a wild situation in the beginning, like the most LA of stories. I was a nanny for a family in Beverly Hills. They owned a video game studio. I mentioned my film idea to the mom. The next day, she was like, hey, can you come pitch the film to the dad and his team? And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, they're launching a indie film division and they're looking for some small quirky projects. And I was like, well, and a pitch, like that's something you prepare for. I have handouts for. And she was like, oh, it's casual. Just come down. So I did. They were like, thumbs up, green light, like we started the process. A matter of weeks later, they were purchased by a Japanese gaming company that like had no use for this not even yet established film department, and everything fell apart. And I had to figure out like, hey, is there a way to do this by the bootstraps, or do we need to call it quits? And I decided to do it. And it was awful. There were so many brick walls. There were so many times, talk about parallels with ultra running. There were so many brick walls that presented themselves that should have been game enders. But because I had such a good why, I was making the film to honor my mom. That's at the end of the day what the film was about. And there was really no scenario where I could not finish the film and not be racked with guilt and disappointment for the rest of my life. So I didn't have a choice. And ultra running and the filmmaking process taught me about a lot about what happens when you just stubbornly refuse not to quit, which is a hard choice to make, but the results are pretty surprising.
Yeah. So what I'm taking from this podcast is to be happily stubborn without giving a shit.
Exactly. Yes. You just summed it up. Screw the rest of the episode. That's what we talked about.
Yeah, there's our clip right there.
That's so good.
Well, we finished our marks and we have to put our party pants on.
We got to go to dinner. We got to put our party pants on and go to Din Din.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks
this has
for
been an
having me.
absolute
It was
blast.
so fun. Yeah.
I love knowing everything about a person and you knowing very little about me. So
well, we got time.
Yeah, we got time. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Hell yeah. That was great. That was so much fun, honestly. At the Brooks Summit, I was like,